The Emperor of Mankind is one of the greatest beings in all of the Warhammer galaxy. Truly, Big E has proven himself to be amongst the greats in this grim dark universe. But while he's indeed one of the very best, that does not mean that he might be the best. Indeed, many argue that there are those who could rival the Golden Emperor of Mankind, but there are even more who claim that there are those who might surpass the Golden Lord of Terror, such as the Silent King, Szarekh, the loss of the Triarchs. Indeed, there are many who claim that while Big E is great good and everything for all of mankind, the Necrons themselves are so much more than mankind. So thus the greatest of their species should far outweigh that of our own. And ladies and gentlemen, I've come through the sources, I've looked in the books, because in this video we're going to take a look at all the feats these lads have achieved, everything that they've done, how they rule their galaxy, how they rule their universe, and what exactly it all means to them. So by the end of it, you'll know just exactly how a duel between the Emperor of Mankind and Szarekh, the Silent King of the Necrons, would go down. So to start us off, ladies and gentlemen, let's start off with the eldest of our combatants, taking a look at the unspeaking monarch of the undead legions, Szarekh, the Silent King. But before we can get into all the details proper, a little bit of background as per usual. Who exactly is Szarekh? Szarekh is the final Silent King of the Necron tier. The Necron tier being the flesh species that existed before the convergence of the Necrons. Way back when the Necron tier had their genes altered. You see, they lived to a cancerous sun. Thus, basically living to the age of 60 was basically unheard of, meaning that a lot of them died terrible lives. It was grim, it was bad, and they didn't really look towards life with any sort of happiness or goodness. So much so, their society began cultivating around the idea of death, and that being holier than life. And lo and behold, they would meet the Old Ones, the greatest aliens in all the galaxy, and the creators of this universe. From there, they would plead with the Old Ones to give them some tech to reinverse and change their genome so they can live happy lives. The Old Ones, for one reason or other, said, "Lamau, no." Still don't know why till this very day. And this caused a war. But the fact that the Old Ones were the Old Ones, and depending on what type of source you read, they could be giant magic space frogs, or how I like to view them, giant magic space dragons. And when you consider that their opponents were basically living cadavers of cancerous flesh based on random Egypt nonsense, yeah, did not go well. The Necron tier were absolutely defeated, wholly and utterly, thrown back into nothing, and they were back right where they started, in their original system. With that same old cancerous sun, because of course that bastard is still alive and kicking in the grim darkness of 40k, everything just sucks. From here they would then devolve into a bunch of civil infighting, each noble house and dynasty blaming the other for the defeat of the Necron tier. However, Szarekh would manage to bring them together and reunite the Necron tier empire, but he still had a problem. They were severely outnumbered against the Old Ones, and lo and behold, there would be a little fellow who would come in by the name of Mithrit, and he would tell them about the Catan, the Star Vampires, a race of star beings who also had a kerfuffle with the Old Ones, and just like the Necron tier, lost. But Mithrit promised that if the Necron tier would help the Catan, they would be rewarded with eternal life, free from their mortal shackle and their pain. Szarekh, seeing an opportunity to not only get revenge on those who had wronged him and denied his people the ability to live happy lives, but also getting them those happy lives in the same turn, to him it was a no-brainer. He accepted Mithrit's deal, and the Necron tier Catan alliance would take in effect. And here Szarekh would unknowingly condemn his entire species to damnation. But the Necron tier, in combination with the Catan's knowledge, would create for them bodies of living metal, giving the gaseous amorphous beings a physical form. And then from there, the Catan would hold up their end of the bargain. They would create massive engines. And they told the Necron tier, "Walk through that, and your flesh will trouble you no more." And they did. Some were scared, but everyone was forced to, by a royal decree. And as they were howled screaming and crying into biotransference, Szarekh was horrified to realize that when he stepped forth, he was naught but metal. For Mithrit had spoke truth. He was free from his mortal coil in his physical flesh, but so too was his soul. But whilst the higher ranking nobles and guards were able to retain some of their previous cognizance and their memories and personality, the normal citizenry were reduced to naught but unthinking automata, their souls stolen and devoured gluttously greedily by the damnable Catan. For Mithrit, known as the Deceiver, had indeed told the truth, but just not all of it. And thus, the Necrons were enslaved by the Catan and forced to make war against the Old Ones not as allies, but as mindless chattel driven before their uncaring hosts. And thus the war would continue. Slowly but surely, the Catan with their legions of undying slaves would eventually overwhelm the Old Ones. However, it was here on the cusp of victory that the Catan revealed their most damnable secret and their ultimate weakness. They turned on each other, fighting and devouring for each little bit of territory. Like the greedy, gluttonous pigs that they were, unity was absent, and Szarekh, The Silent King would summon his people into rebellion, and he would shatter each and every single one of the Necron tier, containing them in shards, to be used as weapons by the Necrons. But whilst the Katana killed the Necron tier, Szarekh would be the leader of the Necron Dynasties. The Necrons had repaid them tenfold. And lo, the Necrons stood, lords of the galaxy. But Szarekh, seeing what was happening, seeing what had befallen his people before, and seeing what had befallen the Catan, knew that his people would eventually fall into infighting. And even as he spoke, dynasties already began claiming territory of others, and the civil war that was brewing would rip the galaxy in twain. Thus did the Silent King decree that each and every one would fall into slumber. No Necron would awake. They would sleep until the lesser races devoured themselves, and when they would awake, the Necrons would be the one true masters of the galaxy. But this great sleep would not befall the great Silent King. His shame, his pain, his sorrow of what he had done to his people via his hubris drove him to roam in exile. He would go into the farthest reaches of the blackness of space and wander for all eternity in silent penance of how he had harmed his people. That was until he discovered the Tyranids and realized that, oh god, they're trying to eat everything. So he hopped back, lo and behold, he came back, and here he is, leading the Necron tier back into the galaxy. Problem is though, that Necron infighting is still around, notably by one Imhotep the Stormlord, and all the lesser races are still about and kicking. But the Silent King doesn't care. Homie been there, done this shit before, and he's gonna get it done. Also, the reason why he's called the Silent King is because back in the day, whenever a decree had to be made out, it would only be his triarchs or his heralds who would give it out. The actual king would never speak to his people, he would never give addresses, even in court. Therefore he was silent, the Silent King. Also, by the way, this right here is complete headcanon, but I love to imagine that he kind of has like some type of word power, kind of like a nuncia, so that's why he doesn't speak. So if ever someone really just pisses him off, he's just like a dragonborn from Skyrim, hit him with a Feats Jaw and Necron Lamau, and they get sent flying across the galaxy. Is that the case? Absolutely not. That's purely my own bullshit, but oh, you gotta admit, that would be funny. But with all that done and sorted, let's now take a look at some of the arms, abilities, and feats of the Silent King, to see just what exactly this Lord of Necrons can get done. Firstly, we know that he is in fact the strongest of the Necrons, literally. His biotransference was the most powerful, the most successful, taken from Necron Codex 9th edition. Few beings in the galaxy possess the might, wisdom, and sweeping vision of Szarekh, last of the Silent Kings. During the nightmarish transition of biotransference, it was Szarekh who emerged with the most powerful and advanced of all the bodies gifted to the newly fashioned Necron race. And this, ladies and gentlemen, was only the stock standard model, but you see, Szarekh managed to get some solid upgrades, like wearing a Necron skin as his armor. The might of the final Triarch, at least, is beyond question. Szarekh's dais is empowered by a caged shard of Nazrazatha himself, while the Silent King's mantle is formed from the Catan's Flen's necrodermis. It is the Burning One's own fire that Szarekh amplifies through his regal scepter of eternal glory, sending it blazing forth in searing beams of absolute destruction. Okay, so real quick, who is this Burning One? The Burning One is one of the Great Catan. The Catan have a power hierarchy, Catan like the Void Dragon and the Nightbringer being up there, but the Burning One was part of that big old trio. It is stated that he was one of the most cruel, evil, and destructive of all the Catan, meaning that anything made from his skin or that contains his power is incredibly durable. We know for a fact that shards of the Nightbringer and the Void Dragon are terribly potent, and the Burning One is considered on their level at the very least. And when you consider that Szarekh has at least 3 different shards of this made in his staff, his weapons, his dais, and indeed his own armor, that's a lot of power for him to wield. But then that begs the question, if this thing was so deadly, how the hell did he get it? And here we come to like a lot of issue that I have with people, because looking into this and looking to what a lot of people think, they often chalk up Zarekh's achievements to, oh, superpowered ultra technology. They often discount him as a warrior himself, which is objectively wrong, especially when you consider that's in direct contrast to what the source material tells us. Taken from Codex Necrons, 9th edition. The mirth of all cruel things was Nazrazatha, who was called the Burning One, the immolating glee, and the breath of the infinite pit. All things were its kindling, for its will was the searing stars that blackened the strands of aeons, and its ravenous touch no thing of the real nor the echo realm might endure. It was the pyre of the labyrinth, the torch of the ziggurats lost, the reaping winds of ember blight. How came that thing unto its end no record speaks, but that a single etching upon a single wall upon a single world shows the Silent Lord himself laying his spear unto its molten heart. So fell Nyadrazatha, the Burning One. Now I know that it says how unto this thing its end came, no record speaks, but when you consider that the very next thing is an image of Szarekh stabbing him to death in the chest with his spear, me personally, I think it's safe to say that he killed him in a 1v1, because you don't exactly just stab a Catan all willy-nilly like that. Szarekh is one of the greatest leaders in all of Warhammer 40k. He is cunning, measured, and an excellent general, but people somehow translate that to being that he lacks in other departments and areas. But the truth be told, we have no reason to doubt that he's an excellent martial combatant. And again, here we have a direct source saying that he 1v1 a Catan, full-on Catan. And again, it makes sense, especially when you consider that he has the greatest structured power of all the Necron bodies, and it's empowered by other Catan shards. Also, that power is apparent to even those who hate him, as even the Blood Angels under Captain Tycho and Chapter Master Dante himself, when they met the Silent King, they felt a mixture of both hatred, but also, they felt his incredible power. That's something that you can't just contain. So in regards to what exactly he has Catan energies coursing through his staff, meaning that he's able to unleash burning light. And we've seen that burning light in action. Forget any type of knight or any type of tank that the Guard or Space Marines may have, it's cutting through it immediately. You're going to need some type of anti-psychic warding to bar that off. But speaking of anti-psychic warding, that thing goes into his next set of powers. His ability to manipulate black stone. The old ones were incredibly potent psykers. The Necron tier, not so much. Thus, they had to create Blackstone as a countermeasure. Essentially, an anti-psychic material, and it proved devilishly effective against all types of psykers. It even proved effective to controlling the Catan, as most of their prisms use Blackstone as a construct, dampening their psychic energies. Taken from Codex Necron's 9th edition. With the opening of the Great Rift, the rate at which tomb worlds are being roused has increased drastically. Unsleeping sentinels placed on Necron worlds thousands of millennia ago have observed the aural rent in the galactic plane. Driven by ancient protocols, these automata initiate the processes of revivification, and the legions of slumbering beneath the sands are once more imparted with a simulacrum of life. Like all tomb worlds, those recently awakened are replicated with resources most precious to the Necrons, minerals and esoteric substances used in their most powerful techno-magnetic creations. The most valued of these resources is Noctilith, known in Low Gothic as Blackstone. It is through Blackstone that the Necrons are able to create their star-spanning tetrahedral zones of stable space, perfectly ordered tracks of reality that are resistant to the warping influences of chaos. Blackstone. Pretty important considering it just turn off psychic nonsense. We also see this during the Siege of Cadia. When activating the pylons, everything warp related, demons, both imperial and chaotic, disappear and vanish. But then that brings me on to the next things that Szarekh may have at his disposal, that being his advanced technology. We are quoted as such that Necron technology is so advanced that it can seem like actual magic. A most potent example of this being Necron chronomancers, whose ability to manipulate technology translates into time travel, or the illusion thereof. Then of course there's also the Celestial Ori, which has the ability to wipe out a planet by a simple delete click. Szarekh being the king that he is, whilst he may not have direct access to these weapons and technology, it wouldn't be hard for him to get access to it easily. But the final thing I want to really look at is Zarekh's mentality, and just exactly how he feels about everything and the state of the galaxy as is. For all this, Szarekh suffers, as he has suffered ever since he realized the purgatory to which he had consigned his people. Millennia heaped upon millennia, and still the Silent King's guilt remains as a jagged and bitter within him as it once was. His sorrow and horror have been preserved by his mechanized mind, as perfectly as every single memory, thought, and feeling Szarekh has experienced ever since the day of his biotransference. It can be said with certainty that such an impossible burden as this would have driven even the most resilient of living beings to madness and self-destruction aeons ago. Szarekh regrets what happened. He regrets everything. That's what drove him to exile. But the only thing that made him come back from that exile is his sense of duty. For the only thing that outweighs his sense of shame is his ironclad sense of responsibility. And that's important, because when you consider a fight to the death, no holds barred cage match, will and endurance is what ultimately makes the difference. It's not about who deserves it more. It's not about who's more capable. It's about who wants it more badly. And usually, the strength and will that demon can draw on can rent the heavens asunder and throw them down, much like a certain Silent King of the Necron tier. Though that is something that the Silent King is not sure alone. It appears that that will is something that all great monarchs of the Warhammer 40k galaxy have, such as the Golden Lord of Humanity, the Lightning Lord of Terror, the Emperor of all mankind. Let's take a look at Big E and what he got when it comes to throwing hands. Right, the story of Big E is one that you're all familiar with, but in case you aren't, Big E was initially formed tens of thousands of years ago by the mass ritualistic suicide of a bunch of shamans, aka proto-psychers. He was then created to be one of, if not the greatest perpetual and psyker humanity had ever seen. Over the course of humanity's history, he would encompass many of our most famous figures of history and slowly begin shaping the world as he saw fit. But he would always do this from the shadows. That was, however, until the age of technology and the AI rebellion that happened after it. That then plunged mankind into older night. 5,000 years of regression and degradation, and upon the blasted ruined sandscapes of what was once noble terror, Big E would emerge and reveal himself openly, declaring himself the Emperor of all mankind, and to usher us into a new epoch of understanding, learning, and most importantly, triumph. Thus he would unite all of Terra and create many gene-augmented super soldiers, including the Thunder Warriors, Space Marines, Adeptus Custodes, and his greatest creations, the Primarchs. But Chaos would see the terrible foe that was the Emperor and sought to wound him before he could accomplish what he must. And so, through the corruption of the legions, Horus Lupercal, his greatest son, would be turned against him, and the Horus Heresy would be born. A terrible civil war that ultimately would result in the Emperor having to take the life of his most blessed son, and leaving him forever mortally wounded upon the throne of gold. Not the leader of truth humanity had wished, but now a divine skeletal god, worshipped by the thankless masses. And the Imperium for the next 10,000 years would degrade and degrade and degrade into naught but pitiful damnation. And along that way, he kind of became a god and then, resurrected a bunch of people, and then there's Imperial Saints and demons, and he slapped Nurgle upside the ass and burnt his god in Lamau. But y'all are familiar with Big E's story. But now time for his power. Big E is without a doubt the greatest psychic humanity has ever had, period. His psychic prowess is so incredibly unfathomable that even in his mortal form in 30k, he was able to absolutely destroy demonic entities, so much so they would howl and cry him the anathema. And whilst we are taking a look at these guys at their heights, aka 30k for Big E, and at the height of the Empire before the Big Sleep for Szarekh, even at this point, where he's weaker arguably now than he is in 40k, he is an absolute monster. And for those wondering why I'm doing it like this, it's because, dude, 40k Big E would absolutely floor Szarekh. He's literally a god right now, and that's just another conversation for another time. Let's not do that, please, thank you. Same reason why I'm only including them in a one-on-one. If it was the height of the Necron Empire versus the height of the Human Empire, dude, Big E's getting folded like a goddamn lawn chair. I'm not hearing it from nobody. Necrons are fucking scary. But the thing is about Big E, his psychic power only increased more and more and more as the heresy went on, culminating in his final duel with Horus Lupercal, in which he became his most powerful and, his most chaotic. But that's for a little later. In regards to his feats of strength and ability, even when he was at one of his weakest points during the circa 11th century, he would actually best one of the shards of the Void Dragon. Also, this is where the story of St. George the Dragon Slayer comes from, and Big E is St. George, so, there's that. Taken from Mechanicum. The knight spurred his horse and swiftly overtook the procession, riding towards the dark scar in the earth. No sooner had he halted his mount and set his shield upon his arm than the dragon spurred from its lair, roaring with a sound louder than thunder. Dahlia's hands flew to her mouth, and she cried out as she saw the dragon's monstrous form. In shape, it was half-crawling beast, half lonesome bird, its scaled head immense, and its tail 20 meters long. Its terrible winged body was covered with scales, so strong, bright, and smooth that they were like a knight's armor. The light of the vowed star shone at its breast, and malignant fire burned in its eyes. The warrior knight leapt to meet the dragon, striking the monster with its lance, but its scales were so hard that the weapon broke into 1,000 pieces. From the back of his rearing horse, the warrior smote the dragon with his sword, but the beast struck him with its talons, those like scythed blades. The warrior's armor split open, and Dahlia saw blood pouring down his leg in a bright stream. The dragon towered over its foe, dealing him fearful blows. but the knight caught them upon his shield and thrust the sword against the dragon's belly. The scales of the beast were like steel plates, rippling like liquid mercury as they withstood the knight's every attack. Then the dragon, infuriated by the thrust, lashed itself against the knight and his horse, and cast lightning down upon from its eyes. The knight's helm was torn from him, and Dahlia saw his face shine out from the battle, pale, lit by some radiance that shone from within. As he thrust at the dragon, the radiance grew in power, so that, at last, it was like the light of a newborn sun. The dragon looped itself around the knight, clawing and biting at his armor, roaring in triumph. Then, as though the thought had come from the warrior, Dahlia saw that no matter how the dragon writhed, it always sought to protect one place in its body, a place beneath its left wing. "Strike, warrior, strike!" she urged. As if hearing her words, the knight bent downward and lunged forward, thrusting his sword with a mighty bellow into the dragon's body. The creature gave out a deafening roar that shook stones from city walls, and the burning radiance in its breast was extinguished. Its grasp upon the knight loosened, and the lightning faded from its eyes as the great beast fell to the ground. Perceiving that the dragon was helpless, though not dead, the knight untied the long white banner from the shattered lance and bound it around the neck of the monster. With the dragon subdued, the knight turned to the astonished handmaidens and the people of the city who streamed from its gates in a riot of adulation. The knight raised a hand to quiet them, and such was his presence and radiance that all who beheld him fell silent. "The dragon is defeated!" cried the warrior. "But it is beyond my power to destroy, so I shall drag it in fetters from this place and bind it deep in the darkness, where it will remain until the end of all things." So saying, the knight rode off with the dragon bound behind him, leaving the scene behind him as immobile as a painting. From here we know that Biggie would then take the shard of the Void Dragon and plant it underneath Mars, where it still lives till this day, and may or may not be the Omnissiah, but that's a video for another day. But here we see that even as a young emperor, his mastery over psychic ability is so strong that he can trade blows with a Void Dragon. Granted, it's only a shard of it, but this is still young Biggie. So if we account for that, it's very much possible that Biggie at his height would have no problem fighting natural Catan. And that is something that is very important that people seem to forget about the Emperor. If you take a look at his journey from when he was first born, quote unquote, to even now in 40k, his power has only ever increased. Again and again and again and again. He has been better and better and better. Even as he entered in the stars, he was a mighty warrior, one who could truly fight anything. Now granted, while the Emperor isn't invulnerable, he's still very, very, very hard to kill. He truly is on that level with the Chaos Gods and other characters like them. People always point to the fact on Ulanor where he was nearly quote-unquote killed by an orc, but that's not exactly true. Horus did indeed give him the opening he needed to kill the orc, but if you take a look at the exoscript itself, like yes, for the first time we've seen, he's not exactly ruffle stomping the guy. But instead of me going on and on and on about it, how about I just read you it, taken from the Wolf of Ash and Fire. The Emperor fought an armored giant, twice his height and breadth. Its skull was a vast iron-helmed boulder, with elephantine tusk and chiseled like teeth that gleamed dully. Its eyes were cold red slits of such vicious intelligence that it stole Horus's breath. Horus had never seen its equal. No bestiary would include its description for fear of being ridiculed. No makers of the Mechanicus would accept such a specimen could exist. 6 clanking mechanized limbs bolted through its flesh bore, grinding, crackling, sawing, snapping, flaming, belching weapons of murder. The Emperor's armor was burning, the golden wreath now ashes upon his neck. Chugging rotor cannons battered the Emperor's armor even as claws of lightning tore portions of it away. It was taking every screed of the Emperor's warrior skill and psychic might to keep the mech warlord's weaponry from killing him. Horus shouted. The greenskin turned and saw him. It saw the desperation in his face and laughed. A fist like a reductor siege hammer smashed the Emperor's sword aside, and a fist of green flesh lifted him into the air. It crushed the life from him with its inhuman power. "No!" yelled Horus, battering his way through the loss of the greenskins to reach his father's side. The mech warlord turned his spinal weapons on Horus, and a blistering series of lightning strikes hammered the walkway. Horus dodged them all, a wolf on the hunt amidst the ash and fire of a world's ending. He had no weapon, and where there wasn't normally a handicap to a warrior of the legions, against this foe, it was a definite disadvantage. No weapon of his would hurt this beast anyway, but one of his own. Horus gripped one of the warlord's mechanized arms, one bearing the spinal brass spheres and crackling tins of lightning weapons. The arm's strength was prodigious, but centimeter by centimeter, Horus forced it around. Lightning blasted from the weapon, burning Horus's hands black. Bone gleamed through the min of his flesh, but what was that pain set against the loss of a father? With one last Herculean effort, Horus wrenched the arm up, as a sawing blast of white-edge lightning emptied from the weapon. A searing burst of fire impacted the mech warlord's forearms, and the limb exploded from the elbow down in a welter of blackened bone and boiling blood. The beast grunted in surprise, dropping the Emperor and staring in dumb fascination at the ruin of its arm. Seizing the chance he had been given, the Emperor bent low and surged upwards with his blue steel sword extended. The tip ribbed into the mech warrior's belly and burst forth from its back in a shower of sparks. "Now, you die," said the Emperor, and ripped his blade up. It was an awful, agonizing, mortal wound. Electrical fire vented from the hideous metal organs within the wreckage of the greenskin's body. It was a murderous wound that not even a beast of such unimaginable proportions could take and live. Yet that was not the worst of it. Horus felt the buildup of colossal psychic energies and shielded his eyes as a furious light built up within the Emperor. Power like nothing he had ever seen his father wield, or even suspected he possessed. All-consuming, all-powerful. It was the power to extinguish life in every sphere of its existence. Physical flesh turned to ash before it, and what ancient faiths had once called a soul was burned out of existence, never to cohere again. Nothing would ever remain of he who suffered such a fate. Their body and soul passed from finite energy of the universe to fade into memory, and all that they were wiped from the canvas of existence. This was as complete a death as it was possible to suffer. A power blazed along the Emperor's sword, filling the greenskin with killing light. It erupted in bellowing golden explosion, and the lightning blazed from the coruscating after-image of its death, arcing from orc to orc, as it sought out all those who were kin to the Master of Goro. Unimaginable energies poured from the Emperor, reaching throughout the entirety of the chamber, burning every last shred of alien flesh in the midst of drifting golden ash. Horus watched as the power of life and death coursed through the Emperor, saw him swell in stature until he was like unto a god, wreathed in peculiar amber flames, towering and majestic. His father never claimed to be a god, and refuted such notions with a vengeance. He even had a castigation for a son for believing what Horus now saw before him with his very own eyes. Horus dropped to his knees, overcome with the wonder of what he was witnessing. Now after reading that, some of you may be asking, okay Brad, hold on, you said earlier that the Emperor was okay, but from that thing it sounds like he was really getting bodied. Now the reason why I say that is because when you take a look at the next passage, he literally kills every single orc, like ever, on that world with one sword strike. I think the Emperor was just biding his time. I really don't think that the Emperor was at his limits. I think the Emperor was just playing. Now I could be wrong, I could be completely wrong, but given how you go from, oh no, he's getting bodied to, oh yeah, no, I'm just gonna 1v1 you real quick, not just you, but your whole boys with one stab of a sword, that seems a little sus to me personally. But here we see an example of soul death. The Emperor possesses the ability to literally wipe a being from existence. Their physical, spiritual, and every single aspect of their being, all gone. Be it in the physical realm or the warp, if the Emperor hits you with that sword the way that he does, you are gone. There is nothing left. Ever. Now granted, this wouldn't be much of a thing against someone like Szarekh, because he doesn't have a soul, but the fact that he's able to manipulate psychic energies in such a powerful manner means that he can imbue it in pretty much any way. And we see time and time again, the Emperor is not just someone who has master over psychic powers, but over knowledge as a whole. He is a gene alchemist. He's able to take warp and craft it into gene alchemy. He's able to create technology. He's able to utilize Dark Age technology materials. Whatever the Emperor needs, he can basically build it, kind of like MacGyver in that shit. He's able to take something and completely change it. For whilst Szarekh may have access to amazing technology, the Emperor can make amazing technology. Recently, with The End and the Death, we see how he created the Golden Throne, via necromancy and gene manipulation and metallurgy from the Dark Age. He can take what we assume to be fantasy, science fiction, and he can blend them together. To us, the idea of blending magic and, say, mechanics is something that's just a non-starter. They're two different fields. To the Emperor, they're both sides of the same coin. He can take and manipulate anything, and that means that there is nothing for him that's just off the limits. And ultimately, one may argue that's what led him to his demise. But that's another story for here or there. And we continue with the theme of the Emperor getting more powerful and powerful, because as we see again in The End and the Death, the Emperor has a chance to become the most powerful being humanity has ever known. The only thing in exchange for it is his soul. The Emperor has the ability to become the Dark King, the fifth Chaos God, the Chaos God of humanity. And with that, he would be able to fold Horus Lupercal in an instant. The Dark King is said to be even more stronger than that version of the Emperor, meaning that is a terrifying prospect when you consider that the Emperor who could do soul death is considered his weaker version. Now, whilst yes indeed he would be a Chaos God like the Dark King, one bent on destruction and chaos, many people often wonder just what exactly would he be able to do, but luckily we get glimpses of it in The End and Death. And it's kinda wild. The wind sighs. Ol becomes aware of something flashing and blinking in the corner of his eye. He glances aside and sees that the closet of luminous figures is flickering, its inner light is pulsing, and slowly dimming. It's happening to all the figures in the ring around the sphere. The radiance in them is burning out, each one fluttering like an old lumen globe that's about to fail. The light coming from them pales from painful white to hot flame to pitfire orange, but by the time it dulled to a glowing ember red, the figures had taken on substance, their true forms, hidden behind the light, finally revealed. They are warriors. Giant warriors in ornate plate. They are blackened by soot and char, smoke boiling off them. All picks his way across the rubble and chalky dust to the nearest of them. It stalks still, like an effigy. Staring out to the distance, it towers over him like a mimea. He can feel the kiln heat still emanating from it as it cools. It's a custodian, he realizes. It's one of his appalling supermen. Coming closer, All halts and recoils slightly. He can smell burned flesh. The custodian is dead. It's standing bolt upright. A vigilant sentinel, but it's lifeless, and has been for some time. Its once golden Aquila plate is more than blackened. It's burned and deformed by intense heat. The lance weapon and what's left of its smoldering hand is mangled and broken. Half of its face is gone, the other half a burned out skull, smoke oozing from the empty socket, and bleeding like steam between the loss of scorched teeth. Shreds of tarry meat cling from the flame-darkened bones. "What have you done?" All murmurs. He stumbles on and reaches the next of the figures. Its state is similar. Its spear, broken off, is fused to the roasted bones of its hand. The remains held upright by a torch power armor are half incinerated. Tersely black sludge coats the burned skeleton. The skull's lower jaw hangs loose and low, and though in mid-scream, kept in place by the last cooked tendons. The third seems a little better, but as All approaches it, he sees some hints of oromite glittering beneath the powder of soot. This one still has some skin, but broiled to leather on its face. It has a mark on it too, a patch of its heavy breastplate that is curiously intact. All sees the goldwork there, the remains of ornate inlay, some symbol, a faintly glowing sigil that looks hand-drawn. It has been marked on that area of the breastplate, and it remains untouched. All stares at it, trying to make sense of the symbol. The sentinel's eyes snap open. So yeah, you remember when I mentioned necromancy? It turns out that the Dark King has the ability to raise even custodians from the dead. This is a big deal because the Emperor put a lot of effort into them, and when you consider that a natural custodian has an innate resistance to warp nonsense, this is a big deal. From here we can consider that the Dark King would be a god of humanity, a chaos god of humanity, essentially a necromancer lord, some combination between a divine mandate wrathful war god and a terrifying evil lich of night. It sounds pretty badass when I say it out loud, not gonna lie. But ultimately, the Emperor chose not to. He decided against it. Granted, all managed to help him, but that's the thing about the Emperor. The Emperor, for all his faults, his arrogance and stupidity, he never did anything he did for power. He never did it because he wanted it. He did it because he thought that this was the best thing. Now, whether or not you agree with them on this is the best thing or not, that's something here nor there, but the Emperor really did give it his damn best. He gave it his all. He tried. He wanted humanity to be better, and he was willing to do anything to achieve that goal. He became absorbed in it. He wanted us to thrive. He wanted us to be protected from the evils of chaos. And ultimately, when presented with a chance of completely securing humanity at the cost of becoming chaotic and condemning us to essentially what he had fought so long to stave off, he chose not to. And in choosing not to, it cost him his life. More than his life. It made him into something that he always hated. A god. But he did it for humanity. The Emperor is dutiable, and that duty is noble. You may argue that may be misplaced, but it's still noble. But from one noble self-sacrificing ruler to another, let's now compare the two. So we're taking a look at both of them. We're taking a look at their skills, their abilities, their weapons, their gear, and their tactics. But now, let's answer the question. Who exactly would win in the fight? And it's very important here that we make two very unique distinctions. There is them as they would in character, or them in a normal state of mind, and them when it's fuck you, no holds bar. Because those are two very, very different people. So we're gonna start with that one real quick. In the no holds bar cage match All Hell on Fire, we have Grim E over here, who is literally the Dark King, versus Szarekh, who's willing to unleash the full might of the Necron tier Empire technologies. It's probably gonna be a draw if I'm being frank. Because while Big E is a literal chaos god and able to channel the abilities of the warp, Szarekh has killed gods before. Literally, personally. It would be essentially an eternal war. The undead legions of humanity empowered by warp and demon shit versus the undead legions of the Necron tier and Szarekh. Two giant lords of superhuman magnanimity fighting each other in cold steel and vengeful fire. It would be very epic. But it would also be very sad. If Big E accepts the mantle of the Dark King, humanity essentially becomes a mirror of the Necrons. Once promising people, changed by their circumstances. Now living dead husks, condemned to fight for all of eternity, fighting over a galaxy that is no longer theirs. And in the end, when they do claim it, all that's left of it is broken and destroyed, and they have not the soul to enjoy even the little things anymore. Very sad, but also very cool and very grimdark. But yeah, I generally see that as a draw. Big E is able to conjure the sheer might of the warp, but Szarekh has the ability to counter the warp in every single aspect. So it literally is a stalemate. Basically, it goes like this. Big E pulls out some type of new warp galaxy nonsense. Szarekh then manages to counter it, Big E pulls something out. Essentially, it wouldn't come down to those two, but rather the intervention of a third party. Maybe it's one enterprising custodian of Space Marine, or it's some Triarch Praetorian or Immortal who does something that gives the other side just that little bit of an edge. That results in the other one killing the leader, and lo and behold, their respective faction laying claim as the rightful rulers of the galaxy. Kinda lame, I get it, but hey, that is what would happen. I tell you the truth. But now on to something a little bit more interesting. That's if both of them still maintain their good sense on their shoulders. And here it's a lot more interesting. Because Big E at his height is still a devastatingly powerful individual. With his sword and his ability to channel the warp energies to manipulate reality, he is a nightmare for even someone like Szarekh to face. But when you consider all the technologies that Szarekh has access to, I think that counters anything that Big E can do. It would be the case of Big E creating something brand new, versus Szarekh pulling something old out of the pocket to counter it. In essence, it's their perfect matchup made manifest. Humanity, the bright new child, creating something more, developing unique and different things via their sheer tenacity, versus the established legions of the Necron tier, the old guard who have already been here, who've done that, and are trying to send off new humanity. For they've already created what we are going to make, and arguably made it better, if not refined it to a point. And in that regard, I think that Szarekh would actually lay claim. Now, here's why I say. Szarekh has existed for a very, very, very long time. He has access to technology that has existed for millennia. Big E, while old, is only tens of thousands of years old at most. Szarekh has seen pretty much everything. He fought in the war in heaven. Big E would be able to create things that would bring him to his very knees, but who's to say that Szarekh hasn't already seen that before and have an answer? Essentially, it would come down to this. Big E would give Szarekh a run for his money, but Szarekh would be able to have an answer for it. And eventually, Big E wouldn't be able to come up with something quick enough, then Szarekh would be able to deal the killing blow. And at the end of the day, the old adage remains true. Youth and excitement are always overcome by old age and treachery. And when you consider old age and treachery, well, hell, that might as well be the goddamn calling card for the Necrons. And who is the greatest of the Necrons? If not Szarekh, the Silent King. But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you guys think down below. Do you guys agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Do you think that Biggie would overcome Szarekh by the sheer raw big dick might of humanity's psychic might? Or do you guys agree with me that Szarekh would be able to overcome him with a good old man Necron bullshit? Love to hear your thoughts down below. But ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for watching. I want to say a massive thank you guys for being here, but even more massive thank you to my awesome members and Patreons. Shout out to my Lieutenant tier members, Mr. Eddie V3, Mr. Draw of the Void, and Mr. Curtis Studies. Shout out to my Sergeant tier members, Mr. Damiak, Mr. Warsmith.Fireheart, Mr. Andy McGee, Mr. Matthew Merrill, Mr. Sean IRL7, and Mr. Bullwin. Shout out to my Corporal tier members, Mr. Tremaine the Math Kitty, Mr. Lord Rosarius, Mr. Tech Priest Toaster, Miss Shauna Smithers, Mr. Gentle Salamander, and the Wench of Warhammer. And finally, certainly but not least, shout out to my awesome privateer members, Mr. Thomas Wells Lawns, Mr. Iva_SBW, Mr. Monkey Man, Mr. Michael Aida, Mr. Diego Castro, Mr. Fortress Udom, Mr. CM Dine, Mr. Eric Mossero, and Mr. Dom Marek. Thank you. I love you. I appreciate y'all. Y'all are amazing. Sign up with memberships, get a bunch of awesome benefits, behind the scenes stuff, early access to these videos, member-only content, but most importantly, you get to help out your boy. These videos are not easy to make, and you guys doing this means the absolute world to me, but remember, please, this will always be free. So whether give your boy $1 or not, I will love you just the same. Mwah! Yes, I will. But ladies and gentlemen, I've been the General Bradley 101. You've been beautiful, awesome, and amazing people. Thank y'all also very much for watching. Y'all should say Lola there, boys and gals. I will catch y'all next time. Dismiss, Rangers. I cannot wait for all the Imperium fans to be crying, oh no, how could you? Well, yeah, the Imperium is awesome, but it's not the best thing ever, dude, get over it. And this is coming from me, I'm an Imperium fan myself. God knows I do love me some Eldar thighs though.